a 12-4 record. They won the NFC West division, and they ended up going one and done in the playoffs. They lost to the LA Rams 30-20 in the wild card round. And for the Seattle Seahawks, I feel like this franchise is kind of at a, stagnant point. They're not going down, but they're not going up neither. They're like, okay, here's the level of expectation for Seattle, and here's where Seattle is as a franchise. I mean, they're there, they're meeting expectations, but they're not, making it to the Super Bowl. They're not even making it to the NFC Conference Championship game. Seattle, in my opinion, year in and year out, before the season begins, in the off season, is one of the most overrated teams year in and year out, because everybody says that Seattle is a Super Bowl contender every year because they have Russell Wilson. Just because you have a great quarterback doesn't mean you should be a lock-in or you should be a favorite every year to win the Super Bowl, because as we know time in and time out that I preach on this channel, winning a Super Bowl comes down to more than just having a great quarterback. As a matter of fact, there has been several instances throughout NFL history where average to, slightly above average quarterbacks have won Super Bowls. So you don't have to have an elite quarterback to win games and to win championships in the NFL. So when you think about the Seattle Seahawks, I feel like Seattle needs to improve the offensive line, but they also need to improve, the pass rush, because the pass rush for Seattle wasn't all that great this year. Now, you did bring in Carlos Dunlap, who did give you a much needed bonus and a much needed lift when it came to the pass rush, but one guy can't do it himself. For Seattle, they need to improve their pass rush, and they need to improve the offensive line. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about how Seattle needs to improve the offensive line. Like, the offensive line for Seattle has been an issue for the last couple of years now. And if Seattle is going to make a deep run in the playoffs, they're going to have to be able to get better up front on the line of scrimmage, because when you look at the teams that have the most success in the playoffs, they most of the time are really good up front. And I preach this time in and time out, and I'm going to preach it again. Football is won and lost in the trenches. It's not won and lost when it comes to who's your wide receiver or who your running back is or who your corners with. If you can't win up front, you can't win. Look at this past year's Super Bowl. Look at Super Bowl 55. Kansas City lost that game because they got dominated up front by Tampa Bay's defensive line. Tampa Bay dominated the line of scrimmage on both ends of the football. So if you can't win on the line of scrimmage, you're not going to have a lot of success in the playoffs. So if you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, if you were to give somebody a reason and say, hey, why will the Seattle Seahawks win the Super Bowl next year? It can't be, because we have Russell Wilson. That can't be your answer, okay? When you talk about a team and the only thing you can say is, we have this great quarterback and nothing else, that means that you're not a really all that well constructed franchise, because good franchises that win Super Bowls most of the time, the first thing that comes to mind is how good the team is, how good they are up front, not just how good the quarterback is. So when you look at the Seattle Seahawks, okay, this is one of the best franchises in the NFL, but this is a franchise that hasn't really made all that much noise over the last couple of years. This is a team that gets so much hype in the offseason and going into the preseason, and then they end up going to the playoffs, and then they end up, going one and done. So for Seattle to take that next step, they have to be able to improve in the trenches. Now, another thing that is interesting to monitor is that the Seattle Seahawks are going to have a new offensive coordinator. They got rid of offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer, this offseason. They chose to part ways due to a philosophical difference in the offense. So they bring in this new offensive coordinator Shane Weldon, who was the passing game coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. And I want to see what new dynamic is he going to bring to the Seahawks offense, because the Seattle Seahawks offense last year, and I said this a lot of times, was not all that efficient. The Seattle Seahawks had a big play offense. This was an offense that was dedicated on big plays. It was either big play or bust. Seattle was not good on third down. and they weren't really efficient. Now, that does go to not having a great offensive line, but in the end of the day, I mean, you can't just be a one-trick pony on offense. You have to be methodical and you have to be efficient. You also have to mix in the big plays as well. Seattle was just known as a big play offense. They either have a big play to Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf, but other than that, they weren't efficient. So for Pete Carroll, this season, or the upcoming season, from new offensive coordinator Shane Weldon, you're looking for a little bit more efficiency on offense, and you also want to be a lot better on third down as well. Now, Seattle's run game is still pretty good. Now, the big complaint that a lot of Seattle Seahawks fans had seasons back after they lost to the Patriots in the Super Bowl, after that, was the fact that they didn't really have all that much of a run game. Well, the run game for Seattle over the last 2 years has been there. So really, it just all comes down to being more efficient and being more methodical on offense, being able to be more than just a big play offense. There's nothing wrong being a big play offense, but you also have to be efficient on third down, and Seattle wasn't efficient on third down. So for Seattle, if you are a Seattle Seahawks fan, okay, you're not disappointed with the state of the franchise for Seattle, but you're also not thrilled, okay, because Seattle, the expectation for the Seahawks year in and year out should be to win a Super Bowl. Going to the playoffs, winning the division is not enough, because that is what is expected out of Seattle at this point. It's expected that you win the division. It's expected that you make it to the playoffs. Okay, like, you don't really get a lot of brownie points, or you don't really get a cookie for winning your division and going to the playoffs every year, because that's the level of expectation. The level of expectation is to compete for a Super Bowl. And with Seattle not being able to do that over the last couple of years, they're failing to live up to expectations. So for the Seattle Seahawks, I understand that this fan base kind of has to be a little bit frustrated, because, like, it feels like Seattle has, in my guy Juice Alert's words, reached their ceiling or reached their peak. It looks like Seattle has peaked under head coach Pete Carroll. And for Seattle, I mean, you have Russell Wilson. You have one of the best quarterbacks of this decade, of this generation. He should have at least 2-3 Super Bowls. But you have to do a better job constructing this team up front on both sides of the football. That is what's killing Seattle. Corner isn't killing Seattle, even though Shaquille Griffin has kind of, been, up and down at times. But the secondary isn't bad. Okay, the secondary could be better, but it's not all that bad. So if you improve the defensive line and you get better when it comes to being able to get pressure on the quarterback, you're going to help out that secondary. And also, you have to be able to help out the offensive line as well. And another thing for Seattle is the fact that you're in a really competitive division. This is probably the most toughest division in the NFL. It's either the NFC West or the AFC North. Either one. The NFC West is not a cakewalk anymore. Okay, you got the 49ers, who are going to be fully healthy next year. You're going to have Arizona, who is a borderline playoff team. You're going to have the LA Rams with Matthew Stafford at quarterback now. So for Seattle, this is going to be a really tough division. And for the Seattle Seahawks, if you are a Seahawks fan, okay, this team is a Super Bowl caliber football team. But the talent isn't really all that there yet. As a matter of fact, you could make the argument and say that the Seattle Seahawks are not even the most talented team in this division. I would argue and say that the 49ers and the Rams are both more talented than Seattle. The only difference is the fact that Seattle has the best quarterback in the division. The Rams had Jared Goff, and the 49ers had Jimmy Garoppolo, which both of those quarterbacks were average to above average at best. Well, now you have the Rams, who now have an above average quarterback that is going to be able to elevate the Rams franchise. So for Seattle, I mean, you're there. I'm not saying you're not Super Bowl contenders, but I'm just saying that the level of expectation for Seattle, the win a Super Bowl year in and year out, hasn't been achieved. Okay, like I said earlier, you are expected to win your division. You are expected to make it to the playoffs. When is Seattle going to go back to become a premier Super Bowl contender when they were in the conference championship game almost every single year, when everybody thought that they were going to be the next big dynasty? When is Seattle going to return to the state that they were in the early mid 2010s? when they had Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor. When is that going to return? Has Seattle peaked? Are they never going to be able to compete for a Super Bowl again? Or are they even going to make it to another Super Bowl? Are they even going to make it to another conference championship game?